Welcome back to TKO Takes, and before Punisher One Last Kill drops on May 12th, here's everything you need to know to understand the full story of Frank Castle, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated and most complex characters ever put to screen for Marvel. So if you've only seen clips or barely remember the shows, don't worry, I got you. This is everything you need to know before Punisher One Last Kill. So Frank Castle's story in the MCU starts in Daredevil Season 2, and from the moment he shows up, he absolutely steals the show. And he is such a good character to pair with Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock, because Matt's over here trying to save people, meanwhile Punisher is executing criminals. But how did Frank even get to this point where he becomes judge, jury, and executioner? Well, Frank was a Marine, and not long after he came home from his service, his wife and kids were caught in a gang shootout and murdered. And that's a moment where Frank Castle died and the Punisher was born. What makes this storyline hit harder is that the massacre just wasn't random. As the season goes on, we find out that multiple gangs were involved and possibly something bigger pulling the strings. Meanwhile, Daredevil constantly clashes with him, trying to prove that killing isn't justice. And Punisher fires back with the idea that Daredevil's way doesn't work, because killing is permanent. And that philosophical clash is the best part of Daredevil Season 2, because neither of them are right, and neither of them are fully wrong. And by the end, Frank escapes prison, gets his iconic skull vest, and goes back to war. Now we reach Season 1 of The Punisher. At the start, Frank is actually trying to disappear. He's working construction under a fake name, Pete Castiglione, keeping his head down. But one of his co-workers is about to be killed after a botched robbery, and Frank can't help but step in and save him because he just can't ignore it. And that leads him to Micro, a hacker who shows him something that changes everything, proof that his family's death was targeted, not random. And Micro and Frank's relationship is really the heart of Season 1 of Punisher. You actually see Frank open up, even telling the story of how he and his wife met, which is a rare moment of humanity for him. But then we learn the truth. Frank was part of a covert Marine unit in Kandahar. On paper, it was just a Black Ops mission, but in reality, they were carrying out illegal hits, torturing people, big cover-ups. And when Frank started questioning it, he becomes a problem for the government. And that's when his own commanding officer, Agent Orange, William Rawlins, decides to eliminate him. But instead of killing Frank directly, they kill his family to silence him. From that point on, the season becomes a full-on war, and then there's also Billy Russo, who is Frank's best friend, basically a brother to him. They served together, until it's revealed that Billy was part of the conspiracy the whole time. He didn't pull the trigger, but he helped cover it up. And everything builds to a brutal ending. Frank takes down Rawlins in a slow, violent, personal way, and then confronts Billy, and the fight is ugly. Frank repeatedly smashes Billy's face into a broken mirror until he's completely disfigured, which is how he becomes the eventual character Jigsaw. And by the end, the CIA covers up everything, especially with the help of Agent Madani, who was a crucial part of Season 1 of Punisher. And now we head to Season 2 of Punisher, which is where Frank tries and once again fails to be human again. It starts with him at a bar, connecting with a bartender named Beth. They actually even go back to her place, and more importantly, have real conversations about his wife and her son, and it feels like Frank might actually be moving forward and have something here. But, of course, it doesn't last long. The bar gets shot up, Frank steps in to protect a girl named Amy, and this matters because he didn't have to get involved, but he did because that part of him isn't completely gone. And Beth is injured, but she survives, but strangely disappears from the story, which feels like a missed opportunity considering how strong their connection was. So that was kind of an odd choice for me with this season, but the season splits into two main arcs. First, Frank protecting Amy, who's being hunted over sensitive photos of a senator, and this pulls him right back into violence. And then the second part is Billy Russo returns as Jigsaw, alive but mentally broken. He doesn't fully remember what happened. He actually suffered a severe brain injury from the finale battle with Frank, but he eventually figures out that Frank was responsible for injuring him. So this season focuses more on identity than conspiracy like the first season. Frank is constantly torn between being a protector and being a killer, and every attempt at doing good eventually leads back to violence. And by the end, Amy is safe, Jigsaw is dead, because Frank ended it. He killed Billy Russo himself. So Frank decides to fully embrace being the Punisher, and the final scene shows him back at war, taking down criminals without hesitation. And now we move into Daredevil Born Again. This is where things get weird. So New York is completely different. Wilson Fisk is in power, vigilantes are being hunted, and the city is turning people against vigilantes like Daredevil. And one of the biggest developments is the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, made up of dirty cops who start using the Punisher's skull symbol to justify the brutality. So Frank finally shows up in episode 4 of Born Again Season 1, and when he does, It brings everything back. He has a classic scene with Matt once again. But here's where this feels off for me. Frank does not seem to care about the task force using a symbol. He doesn't go after them. He only does because Karen wanted him to protect Matt. Other than that, he would not have cared, which is just so uncharacteristic of him. The last time we saw him, he was full on embracing the Punisher. Literally, the last scene of season 2 of Punisher was him shooting up some criminals. Like, maybe One Last Kill will address this, but we have no idea what happened in the 7 years since we last saw him. And I do think we'll eventually get those answers, because I think the reason he's not involved in Born Again a lot is because Marvel is saving him for something bigger. Punisher One Last Kill. And instead of being a side character, he's going to get his own project. A short little hour-long film that was co-written and executively produced by Jon Bernthal himself. So this is a character who's lost everything, got revenge, tried to move on, failed, and chose violence as his identity, and then kind of didn't. So it brings up the big question, what does One Last Kill even mean for someone like that? Is it going to be another revenge story? Is it a final target? Or someone trying to stop him? And based on the trailer, Frank might be dealing with PTSD. We see Kurt, his old military friend, returning. He was a big part of the first 2 seasons of his show. And there's also hints that he could be protecting a young girl. Pretty similar to how Daredevil protected a kid back in season 1 of Daredevil, episode 2, where we got the hallway fight scene. And then there's a bigger picture. He's also set to appear in Spider-Man Brand New Day, which drops 2 months later after One Last Kill. And I'm actually really excited to see him interact with Spider-Man, because Spider-Man believes people can change. Punisher clearly doesn't. Spider-Man holds his punches back, and the Punisher doesn't hesitate. So it's going to be a team-up I'm really looking forward to seeing. And depending on how One Last Kill ends, Frank could either become an ally or a serious problem for Peter. What also makes the Punisher appearing in Spider-Man Brand New Day even more juicy for me, is that literally my first introduction to the Punisher was in the classic animated Spider-Man show, where he actually had to help Peter because Peter's DNA was mutating just like it is in Brand New Day, and he eventually turned into the Man-Spider. So I'm very curious to see how much they'll adapt from that little episode from the animated series. But it's kind of crazy that, you know, we have the Punisher and Spider-Man teaming up. Peter's DNA is mutating. So it's just kind of funny, you know, the parallels there. But that's also why I'm very excited to see the Punisher show up in Spider-Man Brand New Day. So that is everything you need to know before watching Punisher One Last Kill. If you skipped the Punisher series, you missed one of the most important character arcs Marvel has ever told. And now he's back from One Last Kill and Brand New Day. So like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and God bless you all.